The hum of the engines was barely audible over the calm water. A medium-sized cargo ship was moving slowly westward, about 60 nautical miles from the nearest shore. The captain stood on the bridge, watching the faint flicker on the radar. The dots on the screen didn't match any registered routes. Raising his spyglass, he peered into the grayish haze. 3 boats were approaching from the stern, closing the distance in what felt like mere minutes. Judging by their appearance, they were pirates. The captain announced an impending attack. The watch officers nodded and triggered the security alarm. Activity stirred on the deck. Armed guards lined the rails, setting up crates for cover and checking their magazines. Several other crew members hurried to lock doors, making it harder for any attackers to move through the ship. Still, there was no panic. Everyone knew there would be no escape, and that talks with pirates in these waters seldom led to success. A short while later, the first shots thundered. The boat swung around the stern at a distance of roughly 30 yards. The pirates opened heavy fire with automatic weapons, forcing the guards to take cover behind metal barriers. Bullets ricocheted off the deck, tore through wooden crates, and shattered portholes. Only seconds earlier, the captain had seen one guard taking careful aim, but then the man fell, clutching his stomach. He doubled over, trying to dress the bleeding wound. The security forces couldn't hold their positions for long. The pirates began boarding using grapples and ladders. One sailor managed to shove an attacker into the water, but a volley of bullets pushed him back toward the ventilation shafts. The captain saw it all through the bridge window. He knew the defensive line would soon collapse. Rather than remain in relative safety, he decided to leave the bridge. 2 officers looked at him, waiting for orders, but he said nothing. He simply left a chart on the table and moved toward a stairway leading deeper into the ship. The passageway was narrow and dimly lit. The lights flickered and distant gunfire echoed first from the right, then from the left, evidence that pirates were advancing along multiple routes. In one corridor, the captain spotted a guard slumped against a bulkhead. The guard looked at him, saying he could still hold them off. The captain nodded and moved on. Before long, he reached the door, marked 3. Inside was a fair-haired man hurriedly burning documents in a metal box. The air was thick with the smell of smoldering paper. The blond man glanced up. The captain warned him that pirates would soon seize the ship. The blond man replied that there was likely a traitor aboard, otherwise the pirates would never have pinpointed their route so precisely. If they truly knew what cargo was aboard, he added, they would never have dared attack. They'd have fled from this ship, like it was the devil himself. The captain frowned, saying they needed to secure the cargo. The blond man sighed and answered that it was no longer possible. The enemy needed only about a minute to reach the hold. The only remaining option might be to sink the entire vessel. The captain silently weighed his words. He knew scuttling the ship was an extreme measure. But was it worth sacrificing the entire crew? Before he could think of another solution, heavy footsteps sounded through the wall. Someone was breaking down nearby doors. The pirates were pushing forward along the corridors. The captain stepped up to the blond man, repeating that they couldn't just stand by. The blond man flung another stack of papers into the fire. Flames crackled, and a dense plume of smoke billowed upward. Short bursts of automatic fire and shouted commands carried through the passage. it was clear the defense was finished. If the raiders already controlled the corridors, there was no chance of holding the key compartments. The captain and his companion exchanged glances, both realizing the ship was on the verge of total capture. A couple more resounding blows, and the door was nearly torn from its hinges. The blond man spoke quietly, saying any further discussion was pointless. Surrender or death was all that remained. The captain clenched his fists and turned toward the door. The metallic pounding intensified. Mere seconds stood between them and a direct confrontation. Some time later, on a small island several hundred miles from the nearest major ports, gusty winds blew. A military helicopter landed on a concrete pad fenced off with barbed wire and tall barriers. 12 uniformed operatives disembarked, an elite Navy SEAL team. They were met by an officer who motioned toward the massive doors leading to an underground bunker. In a spacious chamber typically used for classified briefings, tension filled the air. Government representatives and senior military officers sat around a table. A colonel unrolled a map of the ocean, its coordinates clearly marked. He pointed to a square around 15 degrees north latitude and 70 degrees west longitude. 3 hours earlier, a distress signal had come from the main ship, then contact was lost. Satellite images showed 3 smaller vessels nearby, likely pirates, but no visible activity on deck. The colonel noted that the lack of movement could be a trick. He then displayed a photo of a fair-haired man. This man was a government operative stationed on that ship. The mission was straightforward: extract him by any means necessary. All other hostages were secondary. The colonel looked directly at the incoming operatives, stating that negotiations with pirates were impossible. Moreover, the situation was beyond ordinary piracy since there was total radio silence. The SEAL team was told they'd be divided into 2 squads of 6. Group A would infiltrate the bridge to seize control of communications and navigation, while Group B would head for the living quarters, where the hostages were likely being held. It was presumed the pirates had confined them to the midsection of the ship, protected by steel bulkheads. The colonel added that the operation would occur at night. The helicopter couldn't get too close. Even though enemy air defenses hadn't been detected, the risk was too high. The plan was to use a submarine and inflatable boats, approaching the vessel from 2 directions. The entire mission was allotted 12 minutes. Get in, eliminate the threat, rescue the agent, and secure the ship for evacuation. The colonel tapped on a folder of intelligence data. He explained that armed pirates were almost certainly still aboard, but their numbers were unknown. Satellite data was inconclusive. Officers cautioned that there could be hidden positions requiring utmost caution. They repeated that the agent was the top priority. Everything else was secondary. Their orders were to act ruthlessly and efficiently. After the briefing, the team moved to an adjacent room, where they checked their gear. Suppressed assault rifles, gas grenades, explosives. They also received portable radio beacons, though the colonel warned that jamming could be severe. One operative asked what they should do if by some chance negotiations became feasible. The colonel's response was blunt. Rescue the agent first, then see about everything else. By evening, the plan was final. The submarine slipped out of the island dock, traveling a considerable distance underwater. At the designated point, about 2 miles from the target, the operatives deployed in 2 inflatable boats. The sea was calm, allowing them to move with minimal disturbance. Only a faint quarter moon provided light, so night vision devices were crucial. When the outline of the large ship appeared on the horizon, the teams split up as planned. Group A toward the bow, Group B toward the stern. No gunshots were heard, no voices. Everything was eerily quiet, yet everyone knew that a silent ship wasn't necessarily a safe one. At the commander's signal, the boat's engine slowed, and they glided almost noiselessly to the hull. Soon the operatives began climbing aboard with grappling hooks. Weapons were at the ready, anticipating a storm of return fire. They reached the deck and looked around. Nobody confronted them. No pirate sentries were in sight. The dim emergency lighting and deserted corridors unnerved them. The operatives exchanged glances. They saw neither bodies nor signs of an intense firefight, but they also knew this could be a trap. They kept formation, moving quietly toward their objectives. Each man kept his weapon raised, scanning the metal bulkheads and dark corners. No one spoke. Gestures and terse signals replaced words. Group A headed first to the ship's bridge, expecting the pirates to have dug in there for better control. But as they approached step by step and came to the heavy door, they heard no voices, no footsteps. They picked the lock and slipped inside. The lights were weak and flickering, the bridge empty. Some control panels sparked. 2 lamps blinked over the consoles, but there was no one in sight. Group A's radio operator tried contacting their base, but the headset carried only silence. No static, no feedback. Their leader exhaled and examined the controls. The ship was drifting, though the engines were idling. Meanwhile, Group B moved toward the living quarters. They expected barricades or armed guards, but the corridors were just as empty. Emergency lamps swung on their mounts, casting wavering shadows on the walls. The air smelled of dampness and old fuel, a reminder that maintenance was sporadic. Metal groaned in the distance, but there was no telling who or what caused it. Radio contact between the groups was non-existent. Initially, they assumed the pirates were using a jamming device. But the silence in the airwaves was odd. Typical jamming would produce static or a broken signal. Yet all they got was perfect emptiness. After a few minutes, the teams decided to proceed independently according to plan. Group A inspected the bridge and found several spent automatic casings on the floor. Marks on the panels suggested a gunfight, while shattered glass littered the area. Bloodstains trailed along parts of the floor, but there were no bodies. The operatives skirted the bloody patches, not wanting to leave footprints. Their leader pointed to a cluster of bullet holes in the same spot. In his view, a fierce firefight had taken place here recently, but where everyone had gone was a mystery. The radio operator tried scanning internal frequencies, but with the same result: absolute silence. Group B advanced carefully through the crew compartments. Broken doors and discarded items lay scattered. Shoes, rags, empty ammo pouches. One operative stared down a distant hallway and suddenly froze. He thought he saw a shadow slinking past a mangled locker. It was small but upright, moving quickly. The team leader signaled them not to fire unless it was necessary. Their mission was to find where the agent might be held without raising an alarm. 2 minutes later, they came across signs of a skirmish. Shell casings, blood on the walls, deep gouges in the metal deck. It looked as if someone had attacked from multiple directions and then vanished. No bodies, no voices, Soon, in one corridor, the commander heard a clattering noise. He raised his hand, ordering a halt. From behind the corner appeared a strange creature that looked like a small wolf standing on its hind legs. Its eyes gleamed back at their flashlights. The fur along its spine stood on end, and its muzzle was twisted into a hostile snarl. One operative fired on reflex. The bullet grazed the creature's rough coat, and it shrieked, lunging forward. It clamped onto the throat of the nearest operative, the team's only medic. He tried to wedge his elbow under the creature's jaw, but its fangs had already torn flesh. Warm blood spattered the floor. Another operative let out a short burst, catching the creature with a few rounds. It broke off, limping, and vanished into a dark side corridor. The medic lay on the floor, gasping for air. The leader knelt down but saw the wound was fatal. The medic managed 2 or 3 words, trying to indicate where the creature fled. Then his eyes went still. The team attempted to send a brief radio message to the bridge, but got nothing. No static, no response. They retreated behind the nearest bulkhead, steadying themselves and forming a plan. No one knew what that creature was. Clearly, it wasn't an ordinary wolf. The corridors were quiet again, but one vicious encounter was enough to prove the thing's danger. The Group B commander decided to keep moving. They still had to find the agent, and staying put would only invite another attack. Meanwhile, Group A continued scouring the bridge. They found no survivors. Much of the equipment was partially destroyed, and communications were still down. Their leader told the radio operator to keep trying frequencies, but the operator just shook his head. The deck and corridors remained fraught with tension. Blood spatters and bullet holes hinted at a brutal recent fight. The atmosphere was grim, not from words, but from the evidence splashed across walls and floors. The men could see the signs of battle, but had no idea where the pirates or crew had gone. No call signs came through. Total isolation. Group A stayed on the bridge, trying to restore radio contact. The radio operator worked intently, switching channels. Their leader stood by, eyeing the scorched wires, possibly damaged in the firefight. The operator noted some unusual fluctuations that resembled interference from a powerful emitter. He suspected there was cargo on board capable of jamming signals just as effectively as an industrial device. The leader listened without comment. 2 operatives took positions at the entrance to the bridge, covering the corridor lit only by emergency lamps. The silence was heavy. No one ran across the deck, no voices echoed. Occasionally there were distant metallic bangs, as though someone or something was moving in nearby compartments. The leader thought of the colonel's warning that the ship might be carrying classified, dangerous cargo, possibly radioactive material, which could interfere with communications. In that case, health risks were also on the table. Still, there was no choice. They had to locate their comrades and complete the mission. Suddenly, something smashed against the bridge's metal door. It buckled inward, small gaps opening at the seams. The leader signaled his men to prepare. Another blow bent the door even more. The radio operator kept his eyes on the console, knowing there was no quick way to restore comms. The third strike never came. Instead, they heard a muffled noise, followed by a voice calling for help. "Help me!" And then silence, accompanied by a dragging sound across the deck. The leader decided not to remain locked in place. He told the radio operator and 1 other operative to stay put and hold their position. Taking 2 more with him, he eased the door open and stepped into the corridor. No one was there. Only a bloody trail on the floor that led around the corner. The leader guessed it might be someone wounded. He signaled them to move on. One operative covered their rear, wary of sudden attacks. At the same time, Group B kept moving down the corridors, searching for the agent. They had already lost 1 man, so they moved with extra caution. Soon they noticed the creature trying to crawl away, the same wolfish thing they had wounded earlier. Blood oozed from its side. It was barely able to lift its paws. The commander gave a short order. Fire. A few bullets tore into the beast, and it collapsed. The soldiers drew closer, shining their flashlights on it. The creature stood no taller than 5 feet, yet looked like an unnatural cross between a human and a wolf. One of the soldiers muttered that command must have kept them in the dark, otherwise they would have prepared for a threat like this. They hadn't even finished checking the body when footsteps sounded behind them. It was the fair-haired man. He raised his hands to show he was unarmed, saying he needed help. The operatives recognized him from the photograph. He was the agent. They demanded an explanation. He walked closer, but when he saw the dead creature, his face contorted in terror. He whispered that they had made an irreparable mistake. "Now she won't let you go," he said. The leader asked what he meant, but the agent just repeated that he couldn't stay with them and bolted down the corridor. 2 soldiers chased after him. The other 2 remained where they were, covering the passage and watching their flank. The commander cursed under his breath. If they lost the agent, the entire mission would be for nothing. Meanwhile, 3 members of Group A who'd left the bridge were following a trail of blood into a dark room. The stench of decay and dampness assaulted their nostrils. The Group A leader surveyed what appeared to be the ship's mess hall. Tables were overturned, chairs scattered, and in one corner lay half of a human body. Blood trickled down a sloped surface into a puddle by the bulkhead. 2 soldiers covered the entrance, guarding their commander as he searched for survivors. Suddenly, a harsh metallic clang came from above. Something dropped off the steel beams, 8 feet up from the floor. The commander spun around, and the creature seized him by the throat in one swift motion. No scream, no defense. His head was severed from his body. All the 2 remaining soldiers caught was a flash of horror as the commander's body fell. One of them fired instinctively at the silhouette, trying to land a shot dead center. The other tried to illuminate the target with his flashlight, but the creature moved too fast, as though it knew the surroundings. Their bullets only ripped into the walls, carving deep holes. Then one soldier felt claws rake across his back. There was no roar. The monster attacked in silence. He let out a choking gasp and collapsed to his knees, blood draining from his body. The last SEAL in that trio realized they were outmatched. He took a few steps toward the exit, but the creature blocked his path. A tall figure with thick fur and huge fangs that tore out his throat in a single swipe. His consciousness dimmed as he glimpsed 2 smaller wolf-like figures behind the larger beast. During this time, Group B continued chasing the fair-haired agent. Their leader insisted they not fire, afraid of pushing him into outright panic. They heard bursts of gunfire in another part of the ship and guessed that Group A was locked in combat. But there was no radio contact. When they came to a narrow corridor, the agent had already found a hiding spot. The soldier scanned the area and saw him farther down, huddled behind a heap of fallen crates. He was pressed against the wall, muttering incoherently. The commander approached and caught disjointed phrases about the child and her wrath. They tried to lead him back to the deck, but he wouldn't answer their questions, only stared at them with wide, fearful eyes. The leader crouched beside him, urging him to cooperate, but the agent shook his head, repeating that it was already too late. The soldiers exchanged uneasy looks, uncertain of what he meant. Their conversation was cut short by fresh gunfire echoing from somewhere nearby. Seizing the moment, the agent bolted down the corridor. Elsewhere, Group A was almost entirely wiped out. The radio operator and 2 soldiers left on the bridge decided their teammates weren't coming back. If that was true, they needed to plant explosives in key areas, following protocol, then head for the helicopter platform. The radio operator checked the gear again. There was still no communication with the sub or headquarters. With grim efficiency, he and his 2 companions set out through the corridors, placing charges where they were supposed to. They would stick to the plan. Moments before, heavy claws had echoed along the metal deck. The sharp odors of smoke, oil, and dried blood filled the air. In the dim glow of emergency lights, the she-werewolf watched from behind a warped bulkhead. She saw how the 2-legged ones kept moving up and down the corridors. They carried weapons and posed a threat to her and her young. Her breath was ragged, her nostrils flared by rage and grief. The talons on her forepaws tapped lightly on the metal as she shifted her weight, keeping silent. Her mind blurred with memories of the past. She'd once had a mate, a powerful werewolf she loved, who led their pack through wild forests far from human territory. He was cunning and strong, his fur dark, his movements agile. She remembered how he stood guard at night, watching for hunters. She recalled how, in the freezing cold, he found safer dens far from human trails. Their pack eventually shrank to 4. Others died or left. 2 males, 2 females. He knew they had to be careful, but his brother, also a werewolf, grew restless and began causing trouble, attacking both animals and humans, intruding on their dwellings. He was reckless, bragging that he wasn't afraid of any 2-legged creatures. Her mate snarled at him, fought him, even bit off his ear, trying to stop the foolish attacks. He knew the humans would never forgive killings, but the brother refused to listen. He craved power, wanted more than one mate, and he tried to claim her. He even killed a human and dragged the body to her as if it were a gift. Tensions flared instantly. The brother crossed a line, challenging her mate for his territory and his female. She remembered the tragic events, her mate forced to protect her from his own brother. The fight was brief but brutal, leaving both sides badly wounded. Her mate killed his brother, then stood there, head lowered. She still heard his short, bitter howl. From that moment on, their fortunes spiraled downward. The brother's mate never forgave the killing and left the pack. Then people arrived, hunting them more relentlessly. People who didn't quake at the sight of a werewolf. They were stronger and faster than usual, with tougher bodies and fierce weapons that caused terrible pain. She stayed by her mate's side. He protected her, charting safe paths, steering threats away, laying traps, driving wild boars at their pursuers, masking their tracks. Still, in one fight with them, he suffered a fatal wound. He managed to kill some of the hunters, and she finished the rest. She was devastated. The one who had saved her so many times was gone. He'd been unshakable and strong, but the humans proved more cunning. She wept for him. As she fled, she left a message scratched into the humans' iron beast, telling them to leave her be. A foolish gesture, but grief clouded her mind. She carried 3 unborn pups. It took weeks of scavenging, hiding from hunters, and avoiding open ground to find refuge. Even then, humans tracked her down again. By then, she was weak, her belly swollen, slowing her down. She couldn't fight the way she used to. Among her captors was the fair-haired man. He didn't fire on her, only watched, eyes aglow with intent, and ordered the others to tranquilize her. Half-conscious, she dreamed about her childhood, when the same 2-legged creatures tortured her mother in a lab. Bright lights, cold steel, the scraping of metal. Her mother's groans and clenched fangs. They tested them with blades and electricity, tearing out fur. The pup could only watch. She couldn't fathom why these humans were so cruel. Then the werewolf who would become her mate stormed in, scattering the guards. He was unstoppable, rescuing her and her mother. He was magnificent, but now he was gone. He couldn't save her again. He was dead. She lay under sedatives and chains, about to give birth. Pain burned through her. She only wished it would end. She dimly sensed the fair-haired man nearby, writing notes. Time passed, and she was caged with her newborn pups. She lost track of how long they'd been imprisoned, or where they were. Eventually they ended up in this new hold, then aboard a ship which, according to the fair-haired man, would deliver her to another facility. But outside forces intervened. She heard shouting, smelled unfamiliar humans fighting. Explosions rang out. Alarms shrieked. People ran in all directions. Her guards were unprepared for such chaos. Her cage was opened when a panicked sailor triggered the wrong mechanism. She slipped out, tasted freedom's acrid tang mixed with the scent of blood. People were firing at each other. The pirates had no idea what she was. Grenades exploded. Bodies fell in the corridors. She hid her pups, ushered them into a dark recess, then led them toward a quieter area. One of her pups fell behind. He was the sleepiest, the gentlest, so much like his father. She prayed he would keep up, but the noise frightened him, and he lagged behind his siblings. Her heavy breathing dragged her back to the present. She now knew that one of her pups was dead, ripped apart by that searing human weapon. The metal corridor felt so cold. Her remaining pups were crouched in a corner. Rage warred with exhaustion within her. She remembered her mother, her mate, saw their lifeless bodies in her mind. The 2-legged ones had taken her mother, her pack, her mate, and now her pup. The losses never seemed to end. She heard movement nearby, some of the last humans on board. She understood she had to avenge her child. A mother couldn't just stand by after the murder of her offspring. A long, keening howl echoed in her mind, filling her with renewed strength. She felt the humans drawing closer, but she couldn't simply leave her dead pup behind. Soon a small group of men came into view. What remained of Group A. They moved along the walls, pausing at each designated spot to set charges. Clamp, wire, bomb armed. The radio operator worked quickly. Then they all heard a plaintive cry, like a dog's whimper, but louder and deeper. A dark shape loomed ahead. Approaching, the soldiers saw a large humanoid beast, more monster than mere animal, standing over the body of a wolf-like mutant pup, scraping its paw along the floor. Its hackles stood on end. Its eyes glowed with a menacing light. One soldier flinched, utterly unprepared. A low growl rumbled from the werewolf. When she saw the men, she drew a short breath, tilted her head back, and let out a cry that was part grief and part fury. She looked from her dead pup to the people standing before her with guns. The soldiers realized at once there would be bloodshed. One of them took aim and pulled the trigger, sending several bullets into the mother's body. She staggered but held her ground, claws scraping the deck with a metallic screech. The next moment, she lunged in a ferocious leap. Her talons shredded the nearest soldier's chest. He managed to fire a burst at point-blank range before crashing to the floor, blood pouring out. The second operative tried to dart to the other side of the passage, but she hurled herself at him, claws ripping through his back. Dark blood spattered the floor. The gunfire died away, leaving the air heavy with the smell of gunpowder. The radio operator, seeing his team wiped out, whirled around and sprinted down the corridor, hoping to reach the deck or some hiding place. The pounding of the werewolf's footsteps echoed behind him. He made it about 20 yards, rounded a corner. She was quicker. Glancing back, he caught sight of her open jaws and blazing eyes. Her claws tore through his back, even piercing the armor plate. He felt his strength ebb as she kept going, and he collapsed, blood spreading around him. At that exact moment, Group B was moving through adjoining compartments, hoping Group A had taken control of the bridge. Their commander decided it was time to head to the helicopter platform. With them was the fair-haired agent, who shrank back at every sound. They soon came across the mutilated remains of the troopers who had just fought the werewolf. The commander lowered his eyes, confronted by the sight of what was left of those men. The agent started to shake, repeating that he wasn't to blame for what those people had done and that he hadn't killed the child. But there was no time to debate. They had to get him out of this nightmare. The corridors turned darker, the emergency lights flickered. Suddenly, something massive crashed around a corner, slamming into a bulkhead. Their flashlights revealed the radio operator's bloody corpse, apparently flung with huge force. The fair-haired agent nearly collapsed. He backed away from the armed operatives. The commander realized the agent might try to run again. He told 2 of his men to hold him. But before they could act, the agent dashed deeper into the corridor, and the 2 soldiers gave chase. Immediately, 2 wolf-like creatures leapt from the shadows. One sank its fangs into the nearest soldier's throat, bringing him down in silence, while the other soldier opened fire. It did no good. The second beast tore its claws into his side. The commander lifted his weapon and unleashed a burst, hitting one werewolf's foreleg. It fell back, snarling, only for the she-wolf to lunge from a dark recess. Her strike was lightning fast, crushing his ribs. His breath stopped in his throat. The last soldier, still on his feet, squeezed off a few rounds, but she knocked him to the floor. Within seconds, all that remained were the bodies of the fallen. 2 SEALs from Group B were still alive, chasing the fair-haired agent down the corridor. They couldn't let him go. The colonel had made rescuing this man the top priority. Chaos and blood spattered the passageway. Faint lights flickered, and spent shell casings and dark stains lay scattered across the metal decking. The agent ran as fast as the narrow hallway would allow. When he rounded the next corner, the operatives quickened their pace to keep him in sight. They spotted the word storage, too, on a bulkhead. One of the soldiers tersely told his partner they needed to incapacitate the target or else he'd slip away and compromise the entire operation. But they slowed down when they heard new sounds. Groaning voices, a wet gurgling and labored gasps. Breaking through a heavy door, they entered a storage area filled with heaps of bodies, pirates with feral expressions, sailors in torn clothing, ship security guards with breached body armor. All of them lay jumbled together in a gruesome mess of blood and shredded flesh. Some were still alive, quietly moaning under the weight of other limbs. The stench of rotting flesh and rusted metal assaulted their noses. One soldier couldn't bear it and lurched to the side, retching. Another nearly vomited as well. The agent froze by the bodies, covering his nose with one hand. His eyes flickered over the mound of corpses in trembling horror. The more composed operative ordered him to stay still and raise his hands. The agent complied automatically, mumbling that he had no idea things would spiral this far out of control. The soldier told him to shut up and move to the wall. The agent obeyed. Right then, a growl sounded from behind the pile of bodies. The soldiers tensed, wheeling around in an instant. Out of the half-lit area leapt a beast. Its fur, caked with dried streaks of gore, clung to its flanks, and bared fangs glinted under the lone lamp. The SEALs opened fire, but the bullets tore harmlessly by. The creature lunged at one soldier, raking his chest with its claws. Even so, the operative managed to squeeze off a few more bursts, shredding the beast's flank. It stopped short, choking up blood, and fled. The wounded soldier collapsed heavily, struggling for breath. His eyes reflected the grim understanding that the end was near, with only a few heartbeats left. The second operative darted to his comrade, but the she-werewolf lunged out from the shadows. Her attack was swift. She slammed him so hard across the helmet that his head twisted. His neck snapped, and the body hit the ground. The soldier, still lying on the floor, seeing his teammate killed, instinctively reached for the detonator clipped to his belt. One sharp movement from the she-wolf tore his arm away. The detonator, still clasped in his severed hand, thudded onto the metal deck. Now, only the agent remained, his knees trembling. The werewolf moved closer, catching a familiar scent. She let out a low growl, raising her claws as if about to rip him apart on the spot. He closed his eyes, convinced this was the end. But the creature stopped, studying his fair hair. Lifting her snout, she inhaled, taking in his scent. He no longer tried to hide, only muttered quietly that he had never given orders to kill the pups. She tilted her head, gazing at him for a long moment. 2 remaining pups poked out from behind some crates, covered in blood spatters and tense with caution. One growled at the agent. The she-wolf lifted her claws and abruptly raked them across the floor, as if testing whether he grasped what she demanded. Her labored breathing showed the extent of her tension. She grew still, then suddenly spoke in halting human words. "Help. You help." It sounded forced, as though she was trying out human speech for the first time. The agent stared, stunned that she could form words at all, both amazed and terrified. He nodded, indicating he would help. Whispering, he said there was a pirate boat a few yards off the port side, probably still afloat. The mother werewolf blinked but didn't attack. He realized he had a chance to persuade her. He offered to show her the way, start the engine, and get her and her pups off the ship. A strange pause settled over them. The werewolf never took her eyes off him as he slowly pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. The pups crept closer to the fallen bodies, sniffing them for food. Fear clutched at his throat, but the agent understood that this might be his only way out. He recalled scientific reports describing werewolves' presumed intelligence. Perhaps she could indeed negotiate. After a few seconds, the mother turned to the pile of corpses and lifted one body, as if to help her pups reach the meat. The agent flinched but didn't make any sudden moves. She glanced back at him, let out a low growl, then motioned toward the exit with a tilt of her head. He knew he had to guide her through the ship. He began talking step by step, explaining that the nearest corridor led to a stairway descending to 3 of the pirates' small craft. They moved toward the door. The pups trailed after them, grabbing a couple more chunks of flesh as if to keep their own provisions for the journey. The agent felt slightly dizzy but forced himself to focus. One step at a time, they passed the dying crew, pinned by mortal injuries. The lights flickered more often, plunging the storage space into semi-darkness. It seemed the mother werewolf was aware of the raging ocean outside. She was relying on the knowledge of this 2-legged man, who himself couldn't be sure they'd survive. Slowly, he led her and the pups toward the exit, hoping that the pirate boat hadn't sunk. His only prayer was that no additional soldiers would leap out at them. If a fight erupted, any chance of escape would vanish. Meanwhile, on the secret island, a military council had been underway for several hours. Officers were reviewing the latest satellite images, which arrived late due to some radiological anomaly. The head of the analytics division reported that one of the pirate vessels had vanished from radar and wasn't appearing on any channel. The main cargo ship was still drifting in the same sector, virtually motionless. There had been no contact with the SEAL team. The colonel examined the reports and typed on his keyboard. He announced that far too much time had elapsed. The team was supposed to complete the mission in 12 minutes. Now it had been hours. The generals understood the mission had failed. Information about a she-werewolf was likely true. Radiation emanating from her body was blocking all signals, preventing any communication or confirmation of success. Government officials sat in a secluded part of the bunker, anxiously discussing the risk of a leak. They couldn't allow news of hybrid creatures to reach the international community. The potential fallout was unimaginable. A high-ranking official asked if there was any chance the fair-haired agent was still alive. The colonel offered no reassurance. In the end, they decided to destroy the ship and everything on it. The generals ordered the submarine already within range to fire. Its torpedoes would make short work of the vessel. The communications officer got the green light. 2 torpedoes were readied for launch, safety timers released. In the command room, operators confirmed coordinates, double-checked for current and wind drift. Screens showed the target's position with a 1-hour delay. There was no other choice. Nobody could say whether any of the SEALs had survived. The colonel kept his expression steeled. He knew the target had to be eliminated, or the risk of information leaking would be too high. An analyst raised the possibility that someone from the team might have escaped on the missing pirate vessel. The response was curt. Without a confirmation signal, speculation served no purpose. The order stood. The torpedoes would be fired immediately. Before long, an operator reported the torpedoes leaving their tubes, heading toward the target. The colonel bent over the monitor, watching the blip that represented the ship. By approximate calculations, it would be struck in minutes. A quiet gasp escaped one officer, aware that the ship's entire crew and possibly the agent would go down too, if any of them were still alive. Toward the end of the meeting, several officials discussed what to do about the pirate craft that had vanished from detection. The colonel said they'd have to initiate a search operation with aircraft and naval assets. But for now, the priority was to eliminate the main source of the problem. Out on the waves, explosions erupted. According to submarine radar, 2 torpedoes slammed into the cargo ship. Soon thick clouds of smoke and debris rose above the surface. Shards of metal flew dozens of feet in all directions. Tons of water flooded in through the torn compartments. The ship was sinking fast, engulfed in flames and foam. Even with an hour's delay, satellite imaging registered the strike. An officer on the island reported that the target was destroyed. The colonel jotted down a brief note in his log and then stepped into an adjoining room, where several government monitors waited. He quietly stated that all information regarding the creature and related research would remain classified. Nobody questioned him. Tension hung in the air. The officials resolved to continue the operation, now to track down the missing pirate boat. The government refused to let the werewolf or her pups survive. At that moment, an aide walked in, handing over printed messages indicating that the satellite still showed no sign of the pirate craft. Radio intercepts were silent. The anomaly persisted. Any reconnaissance flights would take hours. The colonel pressed his lips together and nodded, saying they should prepare a new expedition. Meanwhile, a small boat, left over from the pirate raid, churned through the nighttime sea. Its engine sputtered, but still pushed the little vessel away from the wreck of the cargo ship. The fair-haired agent stood at the wheel, glancing intermittently at the dark water. Above him, there was neither moon nor stars, just a faint glow on the horizon that soon disappeared. A few feet away on the deck sat the she-werewolf holding her 2 pups. She kept her eyes fixed on him, occasionally letting out a low growl to warn him against any tricks. He spoke softly, saying they were headed for the nearest landmass. He didn't know exact coordinates, but he guessed there might be an island or a continental shore about 100 miles north. The pirate boat's engine banged and spewed an oily wake behind them. The agent knew their odds of reaching land were slim, but he had no choice. An inferno lay behind them. An empty horizon lay ahead. The mother werewolf rose slightly, peering into the dark night. She saw no shoreline lights but felt it was time to find shelter. Her pups continued to gnaw at the remains they'd taken from the ship, the scent of blood wafting off them. The agent watched and tried not to make any movement that might spark aggression. He hoped he could convince her not to harm him if they reached shore. Behind them, the doomed ship had already sunk beneath the waves. The explosions faded into silence, leaving the ocean surface calm once more. The colonel on the island had no inkling that the mother and the agent had slipped away. A pursuit would surely begin, but for now, in the moonless dark, no one saw them. A cold wind swept over the deck as water lapped against the hull, as though erasing every trace of the recent horror.